So is our real estate market getting too hot for the regular Joe? And I think it's starting to cool now, but if you were to ask me that same question in May or June, I would probably say it's pretty darn close to that. I think it's starting to cool now to where, regular traditional home buyers have an opportunity to compete with, the hedge funds and some of the corporations that have cash. Because let's face it, if you're a home seller out there and you have two offers, one of them is cash and one of them is finance, and they're the same offer, you're going to go with cash every single time. Again, unless there's some compelling story or some emotional attachment to the buyer, if you're looking at it from a business perspective, cash is king. People sometimes say, oh, well, why does it matter whether they get their money from a bank or whether it's cash? Because they're kind of uninformed, they don't really know the difference. The reason why cash is so effective is because you don't have to worry about an appraisal. If they have cash, they're likely not going to nickel and dime you with as many of the repair issues that may pop up because they're expecting that they're not as concerned about it, they're not as strapped for cash. You have a lot less likelihood of a fall through if someone's getting a mortgage and they lose their job or they have some alarming thing happen to their credit. Guess what? You just lost a home sale. Your home isn't going to close now. If if you're financed and there's a delay, that just cost you, Mr. Home Seller, money by eating another mortgage payment or making another payment on that property or tax prorations or insurance. So there's a lot of variables, and I can tell you regularly, loans do not close on time. It is the norm. It is more the norm that loans don't close on time than they close on time. When we tell our clients, well, they're asking for a closing date of August 20th, but just so you know, none of us have any control over the closing date. It's all about the lender if you're getting a loan.
Well, banks are scrutinizing everything.
Right.
Obviously taking a little longer than usual, but
right. And then there's new truth in lending guidelines that cause delays where if something changes on the settlement statement, there's got to be a 3-day period to ensure that the buyer doesn't get scammed, so they get a chance to look at it and review it. I mean, they put a lot of things in place with the intention to help the consumer, and I get it. Some of them went a little overboard, and I think some of them are causing harm to the consumer because what's happened is they've made the lending process so convoluted that it's harming the buyer, because what happens is the seller that's selling the property says, I don't want to deal with a loan. I've heard nightmares about that. I don't want to deal with an appraisal, and I don't. Let's just go with the cash guy. So there's a fine line to walk between making policy changes that prevent people from getting mortgages, but also making sure not to give people mortgages that shouldn't get them. And it's tough. I can understand their position because you have to make it you have to make it challenging because, again, a few years ago, if you had a pulse and a 580 credit score and a job, at the checkout line at your local grocery store, you could get a mortgage for $300,000.
Stated income.
Right, that's it. Today it's a little more challenging. So, there's kind of a balance between the two, whether or not you make it too hard or too light. But the obstacle to that is the home buyer, the average Joe that's getting a mortgage, is disadvantaged against cash. Fortunately, I think some of the cash is slowing down. I think the mortgage industry has improved in hiring and processing loans, and they're getting better at it. But it is competitive. Is it too hot? No. If you're out there thinking about buying a home, don't give up. Don't give in just because you lost out on a few homes. You may have to fire the gun a few times before you hit the target, but certainly don't give up. But just be prepared that it's going to be, you're going to run into some obstacles. You're going to lose some houses to investor groups and other buyers.
Well, I think banks right now, they still have such a large inventory, so I don't think real estate's really going away. Maybe
right.
We may have a lot less, hedge funds buying properties, but.
Well, I'll tell you what, though, what's interesting about it is a lot of people don't realize this. The foreclosures, people say, oh, there's so many foreclosures not hitting the market. Well, a lot of the foreclosures not hitting the market are because large corporations and hedge funds are buying them before they ever get there. They're buying them at the courthouse steps. They're buying them at the courthouse auctions. They're doing bulk deals. Yeah. So again, I don't think that some people are fearful that, hey, all this foreclosure inventory is going to come on and it's going to just draw out the market. It's not. We're selling about 2,500 homes a month in our local MLS, and close to 4,500 a month, locally. Someone recently said, oh, there's over 10,000 foreclosures that have not yet hit the market in Tampa Bay. that's really only a couple months of inventory. That's nothing to be alarmed about.
Right.
If they told me we had 100,000 foreclosures, I'd be a little concerned. But really, 10,000 foreclosures with that many homes selling per month isn't a lot. Isn't going to change our market that much. If we're at 3 months of inventory and we go to 5 months of inventory, it's really not that bad. You know, considering that 3 and 4 years ago we had 25 months of homes on the market. So it's still, even with the foreclosures coming, we're in a pretty healthy place. I think rising interest rates are the biggest thing to be concerned about, though. You are going to make it harder for the average Joe. If you go from a 3.5% to a 4.5% interest rate, you just raise your payment a lot.
Yeah, I think they said a few banks are laying off employees because there's not as many,
There's not as many refinances.
Exactly.
There's not as many loan originations. A lot of the sales happening here locally are cash sales, and I think there's some good and bad to that. The bad is that the majority of your homes are Wall Street, and some people feel like they're the same people that got us into this mess, and I think everyone got us into this mess. Everyone's guilty, but if you look at it from that perspective, it is harder for the average Joe to compete with cash. But I think the other challenge is that it's the average Joe is going to have a harder time buying because it's getting more unaffordable. They're looking at it from a perspective of how much can they afford on a monthly basis, and when your interest rate goes from 3.5 to 4.5, it dramatically changes what you can afford.
It doesn't usually, when interest rates rise, maybe home prices may decline a little bit.
That's always been kind of an understood norm, but I think that the challenge with that in this market is we're so light on supply that I think for the short term, the prices have actually gone up. Over the last few months, as rates have gone up, prices have gone up locally.
Right.
There was a lot of stuff happening before rates started to rise that contributed to that increase in value, but I think the other thing is it's motivating buyers to jump off the fence. And that's a short-term benefit. For a few months, you're going to motivate some people that have been sitting on the fence thinking about buying and say, better buy a house. It's time to buy because rates are going up, and now I know if I wait, I'm going to pay more. But if you're talking about it from a perspective of long term, it is going to have an impact. Probably more of a negative one if rates start to rise. But the short term is that it's going to have a good impact of people jumping off the fence and saying, better buy a house now because rates are starting to rise. So again, you're listening to the Duncan Duo Real Estate Show here on 970 WFLA. We're going to continue this conversation and wrap up the show. We've got a call from Jeff. It's got some questions about a short sale deadline, and we'll keep him on hold and answer him after a quick break here on 970 WFLA.